What's going on, guys? My name is Scalibur, and welcome back to Caelesti version 0.21.3. And yes, that is a capybara. There are now capybaras in Caelesti. I have to admit, this was inspired by the recent trend, or I don't even know if it's recent anymore, but like the trend in memes of everyone being obsessed with capybaras, which I love, by the way. Capybaras are adorable. They're really, really cute, and they're kind of awesome. The baby ones especially are very cute. Yeah, this was actually a recommendation from one of my viewers, so thank you very much for the recommendation. I'm now going to start trying to focus my updates onto a particular theme, as you guys may know. So obviously the next update that we're going to have is the mangrove update. The previous update was the birch forest update, but also in every sub-update now, every single update that ever comes out for Caelesti, main and sub-update, I want to have at least one mob edit, because people love mobs. People just absolutely love to see different animals in Minecraft, and this is one good way of doing it. Optifine recently added a way that you can have randomized models, so there really is no need for the ridiculous complexity of transparent cubes that don't really exist half the time and always get rendered in even if there is a different skin being used. No, this is actually very well optimized. So right here we have the baby cappy and the adult cappy. Usually the way that you would do this in Optifine or MC Patcher in the past, actually, I think entity models are an Optifine thing, actually, so I'm not sure on that one. But yeah, in the past, what you would have done is you'd have multiple different cubes, and they would be targeting different locations on the texture, and then you would move the texture around based on what you wanted to be rendered. So, for example, for the baby cappy, the head would target a completely different section, and the adult head is actually still there. It's just invisible. It's got no texture on it. Now we can completely change the way that random models work, so we can basically stress the same parameters that we could do before for textures, but instead just use a different model. So it's a much better way of doing things, and it's also really cool and really easy for me to do. So now, going forward, in every single update of Caelesti, there will either be an actual mob or a custom mob. This is obviously the pig, as I'm sure you would have now figured out. It's making oinking sounds, if you can hear those very quietly in the background. But yeah, I think it's pretty good. I really like them. You know, check them out. You get the game yourself, go into a jungle or a swamp, and you'll be able to see some capybaras. Next up, we have a really simple change, which is just a change to the Skybox texture that's been being used for a while now. A little while back, I created my own star Skybox, which had constellations and regions that were more dense and clumped, and regions that were more sparse as well. And now I have just simply redone the stars with a completely different design aesthetic, and I really like the way it's come out. For those of you that don't know, I've recently been playing a crap ton of Stardew Valley. I'm actually streaming Stardew Valley at the moment every single week on Wednesday and Saturday nights. So if you want to come over to Twitch a little bit later today, I will be streaming from 6 o'clock GMT. However, as you can see here, we have new different shapes for stars. So if I get myself a spyglass, because I want to do this the cinematic way, you know, instead of just zooming in with Optifine, we can go, ooh, look at that. So we have these tiny stars, a little dot in the sky, as you can see there. It has a little bit of a haze around it. When viewed from a distance, that looks great. It doesn't look weird at all, but when you zoom in, you start to realize that there is something a little bit different going on here. But that's a difficult thing to, you know, process. I can't exactly have different textures when you're zoomed out and zoomed in. It's not possible, unfortunately. But, you know, it still looks good. I still like the way it looks. So we've got these smaller stars, which are just a single pixel. If we look around, we should be able to find a medium one somewhere. There's a medium one. So a little plus sign with the same haze around it, the haze getting a little bit stronger. And then, of course, we have the largest or closest stars, where the star shape itself is huge and the haze is massive. And over the entire sky, it looks absolutely gorgeous. We have the same areas of no stars and areas where stars are more clumped together. So this time around, what I'm going to say is that if you guys want to come out here and create your own constellations, tell me, message me in the Discord, say, hey, doesn't that look like a thing? And then, you know, that will be Caelesti lore from then on. How cool would that be? So onwards with the typical changelog as always. I do have quite a lot of new changes to show you in today's video, and a lot of new weird conditions about Caelesti as well, but I'll get onto those as we go over the content. So first of all, we have changes to emeralds. I have finally come up with a texture for emeralds that I actually really like. It looks a little bit like a long donut in some ways, but I still really like it. I've been struggling for the longest time to figure out a way of doing texture art for things like gems and also gem blocks as well. And I've had another stab at it this time, as always. I don't know what's changed recently. I don't know what's clicked in my mind, but I feel like I've recently just figured out how to do pixel art correctly. And you'll see that trend going forward in today's update video as well. But I really like these. I really like the way they turned out. The block itself is awesome. It has a much larger larger color palette than it did beforehand, as does the item. I think something I was going wrong with before is I was too focused on the pixel art technique of limited color palettes. Back in the early days, I would use gradients, I would use brushes, I would do everything wrong, and my pixel art would just simply not be pixel art. Now, I've actually managed to get this nice happy medium between that and what I was recently doing, where I would go for as limited as possible. Before today's update, the string texture had 3 colors, white, gray, and dark gray, and that was it. Now it has 4, so a little bit more. But as you can see here, the emerald actually now has like a complete and proper color palette, as opposed to the original 5 or 6 colors that I was for some reason constraining myself to. So I don't know what's changed. I really don't get it, if I'm honest with you, but I feel like pixel art has clicked for me finally, and now I'm actually starting to get to this point where my produce is starting to look really, really good. Moving on from that, we have more of an old school Caelesti change, which is actually to the Amethyst Shard. First of all, new texture for the Amethyst Shard, using that same thing that I just talked about with the enlarged color palette. And also the blocks themselves now have a tiny, tiny bit of translucency. This to me seems like something that's really obvious. Like, why didn't I do this from the start? Although someone already pointed out that it does look a bit weird that the crystals are just sort of hollow. But there isn't really much I can do about that. I could look into putting a cross inside of these, but then, for example, for these outer ones, that wouldn't work because there'd be too many angles of rotation for something like that. But it's something that I could look into, for sure. Even just an inverted cube might do the job, actually, so I'll look into doing something differently with those. But again, I've laid out... What the fuck? Well, that was a bit strange. I don't know why I just teleported over there. This world is jank. Maybe I'll start a new creative world sometime soon. I probably should do that, actually. But I like this one so much. We've done so much here. Look how big this world has gotten now. Like, there's so much stuff here. I love the way it looks. But yeah, anyway, I put the amethyst crystals here for a reason. I am going to try and remake these at some point in the future again. It's the same story as ever. This right now uses a grand total of 6 colors, which is the reason why it looks so shit. It's so contrasted. The shapes are very precise, very bold. It's not good. It's not what I want it to look like. So if I remake this and just allow myself to go over the boundary of 6 colors, maybe even as high as 12 colors, then I can make this look a hell of a lot better, and I'm going to. So all of these textures here, all of the amethyst crystal blocks and the amethyst crystal, what are these called? Budding amethyst blocks, and the amethyst block itself, they're all going to be remade in the future, but there's a big long list of things like that, so I'll get to those at the end of the video. Onwards from that, I have my new texture for bone. Again, it's the same story. Bone was previously using a grand total of 6 colors. Now I believe it uses either 8 or 9 colors, and it just allows me to have a lot more detail in these brighter parts. In the middle section of the bone here, this would usually be very flat and just all the same color, but I've allowed the slightly lighter colors from the edges to sort of seep into the middle of the texture, and I think it looks really nice. We still have a complete CTM setup for bone, so as you can see here, if we put them next to each other like that, you can see there is like a regular 1-tile version, and it will extend as you make it larger, which I think looks really, really nice. It's something that I would love to do for every block in this game, but obviously for some it's more fitting, for some it is not. For bone, it very much is fitting, because when you find these structures out in the nether or even underground, it's very clear that they want you to see that the bones are sort of melded together like larger pieces of a ribcage or a skull or whatever it may be. So I think it looks really good. I am open to feedback with any of the changes in today's video. Some of you have already said that this maybe needs a little bit more contrast, so I'll have another look at it. I'll tweak it before the next update video for sure, but for now I think this is a massive improvement. I think it's also just, for me, a step in the right direction in general when it comes to doing pixel art as well, so I really like it. Moving on from that, we have brown mushrooms. Brown mushroom tops have been tweaked to have a little bit more detail so they aren't so flat. The same can't be said for red mushrooms. However, the same has been done for both the brown and red mushroom tops. So previously, these would have too many angles of rotation. What would happen is, if each of the textures on the top face, you would have one facing 90 degrees, 180 degrees, 270 degrees, and 0 degrees. So all of those different angles of rotation would be thrown together, and it would look like a bit of a mess. Now, I've simply limited it so that they can only be at an angle of rotation of either 0 or 180 degrees, and that just helps to work with the way that I've done this texture. The straight lines no longer look like they're meshed into one another, and I think the texture just looks much better than it did before. I think it's a big improvement. Same has been done for the top of the glow shrooms. They just have a little bit of extra detail. In fact, I remade the side of the glow shroom textures as well because they were looking a bit shit, and also the underside of the glow shroom textures was looking a little bit weird, so that's also been redone. Again, though, anything is open to improvements, so if you have any recommendations for me, I would appreciate you letting me know. Lanterns are pretty cool. So I made a new color palette for lanterns, and I'm I'm still not entirely decided on it. I think they were a little bit too brown before for an item that's made out of iron. I mean, you think of it this way, right? The chains and the lanterns are kind of made out of the same material, so it doesn't make sense for them to be too dissimilar. But I like the way this looks right now. And the final touch to this as well, the flame texture on the lantern will now actually flicker quite rapidly. So if you see that, I don't know how easy that is to see. Maybe YouTube's going to compress that to all hell, who knows? But there are actually like 4 different colors, 4 different levels of brightness and saturation and darkness that are all rapidly flicking between one another. And the implication obviously is that there's like a candle or I guess a torch inside of the lantern. I haven't added the same animation to the soul lantern just yet. I have changed the outside of the soul lantern simply because it uses the exact same PNG file, but I'm going to come up with something more interesting for these in the future, I'm thinking. The elytra has been changed ever so slightly. It's not the biggest difference in the world. I'll throw a screenshot on screen once again there of the old school elytra. The old one was too flat. It was too, predictable. The textures didn't really merge together nicely. In this one, there's more depth, there's more detail, there's more definition. There are, once again, more colors. It's just simply an improvement on what I had beforehand, and I do really like it. There's not really much else to say in regard to the elytra. However, I did actually throw this thing in Blockbench and figure out how the edges work, so now the edges are a little bit more streamlined, and we also have these darker tones to the underside, which make it look a little bit cooler when viewed from the front as well. Onwards from that, we have a bunch of item changes. Too many item changes, really. So as I mentioned before, string now has more than 3 colors. Thank God. It actually, oh no, it doesn't. It has 5 colors now. God, look at me. Look at me go, right? 3 colors to 5. So previously, the underneath, like the drop shadow of the string was just all 1 color. Now it actually has 2 tones to simulate different levels of depth. And the actual string itself now has 3 different shades, mostly so I could show this piece of string that goes over the top, going over the top of the string like that, and then going under the string when it comes back around, if that makes sense. This is kind of like a loop, right? So I wanted to make it look really obvious that the bit of string that was going over this bit of string was obviously going over it and wasn't just sort of merged together, and I think I've achieved that effect quite nicely. It looks really good. I could have gone about this in 2 different ways. I could have made it so it went underneath the texture and went back up around, but in my mind, I always viewed it as this first bit of the string was going over the top, and then it was going underneath, so that's kind of what I've tried to highlight by adding the additional colors. I've also fixed the wide boy string on the name tag. God, tell me, please. Someone tell me what the hell I was thinking with this. The name tag string was just really thick for some reason. I really don't understand why, but I think it looks much better now. Maybe actually this bottom section could use more colors so it doesn't look as flat. It's just one of the many things I'm going to get around to doing in the future for sure. The feather also has a new texture now. It just looks a little bit better. It's got more of a darker underside, so it has more height to it, I guess you could say. So you can clearly see that this side of the feather is on the light casting side of the texture, whereas the darker underside is definitely the underside of the texture. And of course, the book and quill has been updated accordingly, and I think it looks much better now. I think it looks way cooler than it did beforehand. There are new textures for the ink sac and the glow ink sac as well. Yeah, okay, so with these ones, the change is quite simple. For the irregular ink sac, the original texture that you can see just here, I always kind of thought that it was too small, and again, that the texture was just sort of not defined enough. There wasn't really any sort of obvious shape being implied by the actual pixel art, so simply redone it, shifted it around, made it a bit larger. It looks fine. I am going to completely change the glow ink sac again in the future, but just for the time being, I simply taken the ink sac texture and just changed the colors, so it's a really simple change. This one also does still have glow properties, so it will glow in the dark if you find it underground or anything similar like that. So yeah, right now the glow ink sac is more of a temporary change, but in the future it will definitely have some sort of animation or even just a unique texture in its own right. But the ink sac is now done, and I do like the way it looks. It's larger, it's got an obvious implication of it being rounded towards the bottom here. I think it looks really good. I like it. Leather has been darkened, but it probably just needs remaking, if I'm honest. So you're going to hear this a lot from now on. I'm going to be going over and revising a lot of textures every single update, just the little things that I could tweak very easily. I'm just going to say, fuck it, I'll give it a try, and it's probably going to look better. The more times I do something, the better it generally looks. So this will get redone, but again, for now, the colors have been tweaked, and it's already an improvement. Moving on from that, some arrow shafts and also some wooden handles have been changed. So previously, what I would do when making a texture like this is I would just simply take the stick texture, which I should have really gotten out beforehand. And the stick would basically go on the bottom of the texture, and then I would draw on the arrowhead and the feather, and that would be it. It would be that simple. In reality, the arrowhead should actually be casting a shadow onto the arrow shaft. So really simple change. This one individual pixel that you see right here has been made one shade darker on the wood palette. That is it. That's the whole change. It's really, really simple, but the same thing has been done on the pickaxe as well. This one pixel has been made darker. Again, it just makes sense because wow, I just did the Skyrim meme, didn't I? It just makes sense. It just works. Yeah, the top of the handle or the top of the arrow should be casting a shadow onto the shaft of the arrow or the handle of the tool, respectively. As for the trident, the trident has been completely redone. I really like it. So once again, I loaded up the model into Blockbench, which is something that I've not actually done before with the trident, and I retextured the whole thing knowing what I was doing. So previously, the whole handle of the texture was the same all the way around. As you can see here, there's some variety on the handle. It flip-flops back and forth between multiple colors on different sides of the handle, if that makes sense. And I think the palette also looks quite a bit nicer. I've also optimized the texture so that there aren't any blank spots on it anymore. Previously, there were sections that were filled in even though they didn't need to be, for example, and those have been removed. So quite some good changes for today's update. Finally, before we go into some more stuff which is more about the future of Caelesti, I have fixed the Birch Doors. I am so happy with this change. It's very frustrating to me, really. So previously, some of you that have played with Caelesti will have noticed, by the way, that these doors suck. Like, they look so beautiful. I love the translucent paper on the Birch Doors, but you couldn't use them because they would fucking flicker. Like, every time you went close to them like this, the lower part would just flicker in and out of existence for some reason. Turns out the reason for that was actually because I was cheating on making the bottom half of the door and the top half. In fact, they both used the same system. It was just depending on which side you were viewing it from would cause the problem. So essentially beforehand, I had used one cube to do the entire outside and an inverted cube to do this internal section of the door that you can see here. So it was one cube on the outside and an inverted cube on the inside, and then of course one additional plane for the paper part of the door that you can see just there. Now, for whatever reason, the combination of having this large area of transparency with a large area of translucency behind it, the game just wasn't liking that. So it would just do both at once, and basically the transparency layer that you got on this bottom part of the door would just win, and then it would flicker out of existence and look silly. So now, Birch Doors, each segment of the Birch Door will now have one additional cube because these are all modeled properly. We have one full cube here, one full cube here, one full cube here, and the paper wall itself. So there's no transparency trick going on here to save on resources. It is now technically one cube less efficient, but you don't get the flickering problem, which is I'm so glad. I will now actually use this door instead of avoiding using it. So thank fuck for that, right? Okay, so moving on from that, those are all the changes from today's video, by the way. So if you're not interested in other stuff, you can piss off now. So yeah, that's right. I see you in the back. Fuck off. So I've actually removed some things in today's update, namely the netherite block and all of the variety of ferns that we recently made. I recently finished up a Caelesti update that you guys may remember, and I realized that these ferns were they just weren't good. They were the kind of thing that I make when I've already got a little bit burnt out on making resource pack stuff, and the quality of my content just drops too much. Whenever I go through that stage of like mild burnout and just making something for the sake of making it, I can always go back and recognize that I wasn't in the best mindset when I was making it, and therefore it was just a little bit shit. So I've just removed them for now. They just simply don't exist anymore. So if you liked the ferns, good for you, I guess, but they're going to get remade at some point for sure. And the same goes for grass, for sure. Grass is going to be remade. Currently, grass just blends in with the background too much. Obviously, the bottom parts are darker and you can kind of see it. And when you're beneath the level of grass, yes, of course you can see it. But when you're viewing it from a natural angle, like I am right here, it just sort of blends into the background and it's not the best thing. A lot of different resource pack creators do have their own solutions to how to get around this problem. I think mine is probably going to be wide stylized grass, so I'm going to come back and give this another try at some point in the future. But also here you can see I've lined up all of the blocks that I am not happy with. At some point in a stream in the recent past, a stream that got deleted because my PC kept dying for some reason, but that's fine. I recently went through all of the blocks and all of the items that I've ever made for Caelesti, and I basically picked out which ones I was happy with and which ones I was not. And I'm now going back over all of these and realizing, yeah, some of these can probably use a few changes for definite, and I'll just go over my thoughts over that very briefly. So first of all, the dirt. I did get dirt. There we go. I probably should have put dirt first, really. In fact, Let's just fix that. Dirt, grass, dirt. Okay, there we go. So dirt uses 4 colors. Again, it's the same fucking problem that keeps coming up for me at the moment. 4 fucking colors. So we've got this dark brown, a lighter brown, a mid brown, and then this like basically beige color. Now, don't get me wrong. A lot of people have made fun of my dirt in the past. I say made fun. It's more of like a friendly joke, or at least I hope it is a friendly joke. I'm looking at you, Mr. Chalk. Basically, this thing looks like cauliflower or meat or whatever you want to call it when it's viewed on a large flat wall. It can look a little bit silly. The top side is also suffering from the same problem. I'm not going to change the way that I've done my dirt. I think the style of it looks awesome. I love the fact that it all tiles together nicely and has loads of different variation and rotational variety. However, I am going to add more colors. It's that simple. I'm just going to massively increase the color palette to say, 7 or even 8 shades of brown and just remake the texture from scratch. That will also mean affecting the grass and the path and the podzol and the mycelium and the snow and the farmland. Oh god, the farmland. There's so many textures involved for the farmland. Oh, I forgot about that. We've got side textures, end textures, and top textures for farmland. And then there's all of the different levels of saturation, which is again a different tops texture, side texture, end texture. There's so many farmland textures. Damn, why do I do this to myself, man? It's not even that big of a deal. But it's possible, so I like to do it, right? As for the other blocks here, you can see there's all sorts of problems going on here, really. Bedrock was straight up stolen from a different resource pack and just slightly tweaked, slightly changed. And again, it uses, I think, only 5 colors. It does imply what I want Bedrock to imply, in that it looks very hard and unbreakable and sort of like you've hit a dead end. That's kind of what I want Bedrock to imply, but it just looks a bit crap and it can be done better, so I will be doing it better. The diamond block is just another block that suffers from all of the old problems that I had from not being able to create gem style textures and even blocky style gem textures. It's just a mess. The implication here just doesn't make any sense. You have these darkened bits on the edges, as you can see. Really, there should be like a light highlight in the top corner, and it doesn't make any sense. I'm going to change it. I'm going to give it the emerald block treatment that I've recently done. I do actually, I really like this emerald block texture. It's kind of messy. When you put it next to the diamond block, you can kind of especially see what's different about these. Like, there's just a lot more going on here in terms of the depth and the shape. You can sort of actually tell what's going on. In terms of like this area on the outside, this is clearly sticking out, and then you have like a jut in here where you have a shadow in the top left corner and a highlight in the bottom right corner, and then it sticks out again in the middle where you've got a highlight shadow the usual way around. You can see what I'm implying from the pixel art in this texture, and I really like the way it looks. The diamond is going to get the same treatment, just in a different shape, and I want to do it properly, and I couldn't be asked doing it this time, so it's not been done yet. So suffer, I guess, cope, whatever the meme is nowadays. Birch is a bit shit. There's nothing particularly wrong with the birch palette. I just don't like these ridiculously wide speckles that I did. Originally, the plan was to do these in like a stylized, everything is larger, but I just don't like it. So I'm just going to remake these, and obviously the same will happen for the stripped wood. The top texture, I love the top texture. That's staying the same. This is actually one of the only things that I've made in this pack that I genuinely really like. And again, it actually does have a very limited color palette, but I think it just works well for this block. So that will be remaining, but the actual bark of the tree will be changing significantly. There are other things that use the, as I call it, neutral wood palette. In the past, I created a neutral wood palette, which is kind of the average of all 6 of the overworld woods, although I guess now I have to actually add mangrove and cherry to that list as well, so I might look into doing that before I remake these textures. But again, just having a block with this much detail and using such a small palette of only 6 colors, it doesn't work. I need to increase the palette sizes and remake these. The same thing can be said for the ladder, which looks really flat and really ugly. The same thing can be said for the rail beds, which again just look flat and ugly. I just don't like it. I'm also going to remake these side bits. There's no reason for them to be segmented like this as perfectly as they are, even though obviously metal should be more consistent than wood. Note block, same problem. It's just different wood. It'll get changed. It's the same shit for all of these. So there's going to be a lot of changes in Caelesti in the next few updates for sure, but hopefully it should be improvements all around, and hopefully you guys do enjoy. Anyway, that's all from me for now. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please do leave me any feedback in the comments you want below. As always, you can join the Discord, link in the description. You can download the pack, link is in the description. And if you think I've deserved it for my efforts in this update, you can always buy me a coffee, which again is hugely appreciated. I am working on some ideas right now for rewards for any coffee coffee donators. Currently, there is an idea to add zombies in the next update, so, you know, like properly CEM animated zombie variants. And I'm thinking right now that for everyone who donates on Coffee, if they want to, they can send me their skin on Discord or whatever it would be, and I would basically try my best to convert their skin into a version of a zombie, which would be like a rare variant in my pack or something like that. I think that would be a cool reward, right? And then maybe I'll have like different thresholds, so maybe you could just get a shout out in your in the screen, like the home screen. You know, I think I already do. I think I already do that actually. Let's see if there's one there right now. Yeah, perfect. There you go. Perfect timing. Thank you, Turtle. So, because Turtle has donated, given me a coffee more than once, I believe. Thank you, Turtle. Always very much appreciated. Turtle will now be forever thanked on the home screen using the splash.txt or whatever the file is called. So, any of you that have donated on Coffee in the past, your name should already be on there. Any of you that go ahead and donate as of today, you will also be added to the home screen. And again, as I mentioned, I will be coming back to that zombie idea in the future because I think it will be really, really cool. Anyway, next update that you guys will see from me will be a while off. I'm going to post maybe a few update videos in the meantime, but the next one is going to be the mangrove swamp, so it'll be a larger, more content themed update to look forward to. But anyway, that's all from me for now, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Take care. Take it easy. I still don't know how to finish a video.